But it's really interesting in these type of situations to see the different perspectives of the different countries and the different languages. Bias is not the only thing that changes, but sources of information as well. I've said it before and I'll say it again, McLaren, please, for the love of papaya, practice your second pit stop. Because at this point, it feels like you're running a social experiment to test our collective patience. We just had the Singapore Grand Prix. Was it the most exciting race in the world? Absolutely not, especially given the last two races that we had. But somehow McLaren managed to stir up the internet again with a drama that no one asked for. And on top of that, we have reached the point in the season where the 2026 grid is almost fully defined. So buckle up, grab your cooling vests, and let's dive in. The Singapore race itself was quite uneventful. The most interesting things happened either on the pit lane, on the radio, or completely off screen. And as always, thank you Formula 1 director for showing us absolutely not what we asked for on the broadcast. But let's start from the beginning, shall we? It was hot. Like, you could fry an egg on the track hot. The FIA even declared the race a heat hazard and offered all the drivers to use the cooling vests. And in true FIA fashion, they later went on to state that these vests are going to be mandatory from next year on, which usually I would think is completely fine. However, these vests can malfunction. And when they do, it's not like you're just wearing an extra layer of clothing, but the vest insulates the heat. So the driver is basically turned into a rotisserie chicken. And apparently the vest is also very itchy and the tubes tend to be all over in the cockpit. So next year when someone DNFs the race because the vest malfunctioned and they were about to pass out from the heat, I really want to see what the FIA has to say about that because it will probably be their fault. Although quite a few of the drivers have complained about this being a mandatory rule, so the FIA has decided that they're going to think about it before they make any drastic decisions. Given how the practice sessions were going, especially practice session number 2, I thought that the qualifying would be similar to the one we had in Baku. But no, even though there were quite a few close calls, all the drivers were completely able to control their cars and make it to the end of qualifying. Except for Pierre Gasly, who was driving an Alpine. But he got very lucky in the fact that both Williams were disqualified because their rear wings were too big. And the driver who got pole was George Russell, which honestly, I should have predicted. The Mercedes car is known for performing at its best in hot weather, and I completely forgot that when I was making my predictions, so I am sorry, George, and congratulations. The race itself started very promising. The McLarens made light contact when Lando was overtaking Oscar and his front wing bent. But he maintained quite a good pace throughout the rest of the race, and it sort of reminded me of Charles earlier this year in China when his front wing got damaged as well. Piastri was obviously not very happy with the stunt that Lando pulled, and he made it known to the team, who decided to not do anything. Should McLaren have intervened? Absolutely not. However, McLaren has created this fairness correction culture where if one driver sneezes in the other's direction, they need to have a team meeting.
She's touching me! She's touching me!
I'm not touching you.
So Oscar's reaction and annoyance makes sense because if your team is constantly playing referee and being a helicopter parent, you expect them to intervene, especially because they have made decisions in the past that were not really theirs to make. I feel like McLaren is sort of digging themselves in this PR pits. Yes, they have won the Constructors' Championship and congratulations on that, but the way that they handle the team dynamics, especially the dynamic between both drivers, doesn't really scream future harmony to me. And speaking of future, a few days ago, Alex Dunn left the McLaren driver program. Alex Dunn is currently a Formula 2 driver, he is 5th in the championship, and he has participated in 2 practice sessions in Formula 1. And a lot of people thought that he was going to be the next McLaren driver once Lando or Oscar decide to leave the team, so his exit was a bit weird. To be honest, no one really knows what happened there. Both parties are saying it was a mutual breakup, so we don't know. But there's rumors that Helmut Marko might be sniffing around and wanting him for the Red Bull program, so we'll see how that goes. Yes, the Red Bull second seat is not the best. It often feels like a stress simulator, but at the same time, you know you're the second driver. Oscar is a no BS type of guy, and I can't imagine him loving the whole performative
We are all equal. We have 2 number 1 drivers.
nonsense. McLaren's whole vibe feels very PR performative. There's a phrase that goes, if you are for everyone, you are for no one. And I feel like it perfectly describes McLaren. Because in trying to placate every single one of the fans, I feel like they're sort of losing a bit of respect because everyone can see that you have a favorite driver. And to be honest, I feel like at this point, the only way for the McLaren fans to be happy is if Max won the championship. Because if either one of the drivers were to win, I feel like the entire Papaya fandom would just collapse. But anyways, back to the race. McLaren asked Lando if he would pit in second so that he could block off Leclerc. Sound familiar? Obviously, Lando, who is still probably suffering from PTSD, said hell no. And honestly, fair, especially considering what happened last time and what ended up happening this time as well. Lando's tire change lasted 2.1 seconds and Oscar lasted 5.2. That is not a pit stop, that's a coffee break. And this could also explain Lando's aggressiveness in lap 1 because I would also fight to not be the second McLaren in the pit stop. At this point, it's safer to risk getting a 5-second penalty than go in second at the McLaren pit stop. Alonso was the driver who stood out most in the race, not really because he did anything, but because nothing else was happening. He had a pretty good fight with Hadjar when he overtook him in lap 38, and he also had a very good fight with Hamilton in the last couple of laps. Except I didn't get to see it. Why did I have to see Zach Brown walking down the paddock and getting random shots of random people in the crowd when we had Fernando Alonso chasing down Lewis Hamilton, whose brakes were failing and was cutting every single corner of the track? 5 laps ago, Hamilton was like 10 seconds ahead of Alonso and suddenly he's about to overtake him. But did we see it? No. Both Alpines and both Saubers were also fighting amongst each other. I think a front wing flew in the air at some point, but no one really knows whose it was. And Hülkenberg spun on track and almost took out Franco Colapinto. And somewhere in that chaos, one of the Sauber tires almost took out a Red Bull in the pit lane. Poor George Russell won the race, but his victory got overshadowed by someone winning a championship. Again. And Carlos Sainz pulled what I call a Lance Stroll special. I did not see him in the entire race, but somehow he made it from P18 to P10. The sparkle unicorn magic apparently only activates on Sunday. But now let's jump to the juicy part because the 2026 grid is almost complete. Technically, we have 6 open seats. 1 Red Bull, 2 Racing Bulls, 2 Mercedes, and 1 Alpine. However, they're all pretty much decided already. One of the open seats left is Alpine, and realistically there is only 2 contenders, Franco Colapinto and Paul Aron. What happened to Jack Doohan? I have no idea. He sort of disappeared the same way that Logan Sargent did last year. No one mentions him. Now here's what I find really interesting about this specific seat, because depending on where you are in the world, what information you're getting about it. Now, I live in South America, so for most of the year, the feed that I saw on Alpine's Instagram was completely different to the one in the rest of the world. You see, Instagram has this feature called geo-targeting audience, which means that you can decide which country gets to see which post. So for most of the year, Alpine's Latin America social media was full of Franco Colapinto, especially before he joined the grid. But in the rest of the world, it was not like that. Alpine went as far as to hire an Argentine social media manager that created posts with audios, trends, and captions that were very relevant to Argentina and Latin America. Until Franco's fans from Spain and some Argentines living abroad started complaining about the fact that they couldn't see the posts, so I think they reverted this. But I find it really funny because if you go to Alpine's feed, you can see that there's a lot of double posts where the only thing different is the caption. But social media posts is not the only thing that changes depending on the country or the language, it's also the information and news. I know a lot of people like to complain about the fact that Sky Sports is very British biased, but newsflash, they're a British media company, so it makes sense. I watched the Singapore Grand Prix on DAZN, which is a Spanish media outlet, just to see what they were saying, and they were only talking about Fernando Alonso throughout the entire race. And I'm sure that if you open Dutch media, you will probably see complete adulation for Max. Having bias for the driver of your own country is bound to happen, and it's part of the game. But it's really interesting in these type of situations to see the different perspectives of the different countries and the different languages. Because when it comes to this topic, the Alpine second seat, when it comes to English media, I see a lot of 50-50 between Franco and Aron, with some media outlets even saying that Aron is probably going to be the one who's going to go in the Alpine seat. Meanwhile, in Hispanic media, they're not talking about whether Franco or Aaron is going to be in the seat, they're just discussing when the official announcement of Franco's contract renewal is going to be. And this is because when you look at different medias from different countries and languages, bias is not the only thing that changes, but sources of information as well. And the Hispanic side of media has some receipts. First of all, Franco Colapinto's dad, Aníbal Colapinto, posted this story on Instagram. He did a get-together a couple of weeks ago with some friends, including Juan Fosaroli, who is a very prominent journalist in Formula One Latin America and who I'm going to talk about later on. But in this post, you can see them all taking a picture together, smiling, with a giant sign that says Franco P1+3. Now, if you've been watching Formula One, you know very well that Franco Colapinto has not scored 3 points this season. And if you have another theory on what this could mean, please leave it down in the comments, but the only thing that I can think of is a 3-year renewal contract. And it's especially suspicious given that Franco's dad posted this story earlier this year before Franco's official announcement in Alpine, with the text saying, "It's very few of us that know everything, F1 2025, and 1 month later, Franco was announced in Alpine. Honestly, I'm considering following every single driver's mom and dad because they seem to be the people that accidentally post things that they shouldn't. But going back to these rumors, Juan Fosaroli, the journalist that I mentioned before, who is really good friends with Franco's dad and with Franco himself, did an interview with Franco at Singapore.
Bueno, el año que viene vas a tener tiempo con el auto nuevo, seguramente Alpine va a ser uno bueno y vas a estar bien.
Esperemos.
Sí, vas a estar bien. Estás haciendo un gran trabajo.
He basically said, yeah, your car sucks this year, but at least next year's car is going to be better. And Franco never denied it. And I know that Briatore is making comments about Franco and putting a lot of pressure on him and saying that Paul Aaron is a very viable option as well. But at the same time, he is always taking Franco on holidays with him to the point where Franco has become like best friends with Briatore's son. Briatore even went as far as to bring Franco to Monaco and help him find an apartment. If you go into the Spanish media, specifically Spain, you will see a lot of people saying that Briatore is treating Franco the same way that he treated Fernando Alonso when he first discovered him. But if rumors are not to your satisfaction, which I completely understand, we can look at the data. Franco has been mostly able to keep up with Gasly and even outperforming him in the last 4 races. Probably because he is under pressure and Gasly also renewed his contract, so he can be a little bit more relaxed. Because let's be honest, that Alpine is going nowhere. But next year's Alpine car is probably going to be very different given that Alpine is leaving Renault and getting Mercedes engines, which Franco is very familiar with due to his time at Williams. So if you were to ask me personally, yes, I believe that Franco is 100% staying at Alpine. 2 other seats that are available are the Mercedes, and even though they haven't made any official announcement, Toto Wolff said that they're sticking with the 2 drivers that they currently have. They're probably just in the bureaucratic phase of finishing and polishing up the contracts. And then we have the second Red Bull seat and the 2 Racing Bulls, but Laurent has said that they're in no hurry to decide who is going to take which seat, which for once I appreciate. Because these decisions are not ones that you should be making on a whim after only 5 races. And to be honest, I don't think we're going to hear any announcement from these teams anytime soon. I think they're probably going to wait until the end of the season, if not maybe January. Because they have the drivers that are going to take those seats, they just have to decide which one is going to go where. So unless any other team makes a drastical move, like one of the McLarens completely giving up on their team, I think the 2026 grid is already decided. Which is really interesting because for this season we had a lot of rookies and a lot of team changes, but for 2026 is mostly staying the same. But that was the Singapore Grand Prix. It was hot, it was a little bit controversial, and depending on the day, entertaining or not, that depends on you. But let me know down in the comments what you guys think. Did you enjoy the race? Did you not enjoy the race? And who do you think deserves the Alpine seat? And as always, thank you for joining me in this post-race therapy session. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you all on the next one.